The presenting sponsor of Moon Tower Soccer is FVF Law.
To find out what makes FVF a different kind of injury law firm, you can visit fvf.law.
Hello friends, thanks for listening to Moon Tower Soccer. This week we'll cover the introductory press conference for Nico Estevez. We'll also reflect on my interview with Nico Estevez and then cover some other Austin FC news and rumors. My name is Landon Cottom. I'm joined, as always, by Mr. Jeremiah Bentley.
Hey everybody, I'm Jeremiah Bentley, and on the day this show comes out, it's going to be Election Day, and I feel like, you know what they tell you, Landon, like always talk about politics and religion, so I feel like right off the top of
That's
this, we should cover this a little bit. So, I mean, like, what's your plan for Tuesday?
I'll say I've already voted, so responsibility's over. Austin folks, go vote if you have not done so yet. There's Travis County has a website where you can look up like waiting times. You can find the lowest wait. Is it League of Women Voters? Is that what that organization is called? That has like
they have a really
voting
good
guides.
Yeah, really good nonpartisan voting guide that just like explains everybody's position on all the issues.
Or if you want a relatively partisan voting guide, you can look at the Austin Chronicle as well. They at least, even if you don't agree with everything, they do say like why they're picking certain things, so you can read through it. And if you don't agree with it, then pick the other person or option. But yeah, how are you feeling about managing the day, and like how do you plan on doing that?
Well, Landon, I'm terrible at these things. So one, I have a lot of wagers placed on maybe both sides of the national election at this point. To the point where I think it just has to come out in the middle because I can't keep myself away from it. I will be going to several election night parties tomorrow night, and I did.
Oh no, that's a terrible idea.
It is terrible, and I did take all of Wednesday morning off, knowing
that's a good idea.
Knowing that I'm going to be up until the middle of the night, and then I'm either going to be super stressed or super happy or super in the middle and unknown. And so, like, yeah, this is not a place where I excel. I've been hyper online for the last, I don't know, month about it. And hopefully you have a more positive path forward on what you're going to be doing.
I'm a bit of a wreck about it at the moment. I'm planning, and Ashley's out of town, and so it's just me and a small terrier mutt in the house at the moment, and will be the case tomorrow and Wednesday. And so I think I'm just going to not use the internet, and I'm going to play video games until it's time to go to bed.
That seems like a really good idea, man. That is way better than my plan.
There's no elections in Hyrule.
Is that your game of the moment right now?
The newest Zelda game. I haven't finished it yet, so I think I'm going to try to maybe beat it tomorrow with the remaining hours of the day.
That's great. And I've been getting continually crushed by Jackson Bentley in College Football 25. So to the point where that is not going to be what I'm going to be doing tomorrow night at all, for sure.
You can't handle that many L's.
Oh my gosh, it's so bad.
All right, let's get into the story of the week, which I think it has to be the Nico Estevez press tour that he's been doing, which featured us fairly prominently in an unexpected turn of events.
Yeah, absolutely. So we heard when we got the release out, we knew that he was going to do a press release. He and Rodo were going to do a press release at the stadium, and it's cool. It was open to the public, like, because I was traveling, and so I got to watch it. I get to listen to it live on YouTube because I'm not going to be looking at my phone while driving. For anybody that I may know or work with, so I got to listen to it live. And then after, like because you were not in the live event for a particular reason, because there are a couple of interviews that happen in a one-on-one setting afterward.
Yeah, they reached out and offered one-on-one interviews to two outlets, one of them in English being us, the other in Spanish being the Top Flight We Are Austin TV boys. And so very honored to be one of the few to be able to do that. If you haven't listened to that interview, I recommend you go back and doing it. We're going to be giving our takes here, but you can kind of listen to Coach Estevez himself and make your own judgments there. But yeah, it was cool. We went into the stadium. They let us set up in one of the club suites up in the upper level of Q2 Stadium. and brought Nico Estevez into the room and just got to hang out with him for about 20 minutes.
That's super cool. Do you want to talk about your fear about your audio file afterward, or are we going to save that for? Is that just for us?
I did it. Whenever we record, so Jeremiah and I record remotely. He's at his house, I'm at my house. So we live quite far away and have busy lives, and it's just much easier this way. So whenever I had to do it on location, I took my little digital recorder to plug microphones into and did not have a backup for that reason. And whenever we do this digitally on the computer, I've got like 3 backups essentially going at once. And so if something goes wrong, we'll still have a show. It just might sound a little worse. In this setup, I did not have that. And so I threw these files onto my computer, put them into my editing software, and saw that they were like 2.5 minutes long. And I almost had a heart attack because I was like, this interview did not get recorded. Dug through my computer about 5 minutes later, found that I just grabbed the wrong files. They were there. The total file was there and was able to upload them and do them. They sounded great. So there was about 5 minutes there where I thought I was about to die.
So what were your big, I guess, I mean, I've listened to it, obviously, watched the press conference, saw people talking about the event, sort of the meet and greet that was afterwards. So, you know, from you, like being in the room and in kind of an intimate setting with him, like what were your kind of your big takeaways about him as a person? And I think we can get into sort of the broader context about if we think he's a good coach or like what it all means or whatever. But like, what was it like being in the room with him?
Yeah, I mean, it was. I just watched the press conference, so I got to stream that and watch it the same way you did, I guess, and a lot of people did. And then had him walk into the room. He's very much came across as the same person in all of those settings. Very personable, comes across as very humble and kind, seems like a smart guy, ticking these boxes. And had someone ask, like, okay, so you said he seems nice, he seems smart, so you're sold on him now. I was like, I didn't say that. Like, I think there's a lot of boxes he ticks that Josh Wolf did not. And so I think that's the biggest takeaway here is like, okay, he's good at these things that Josh was clearly not, but there's still a lot of things that we do not know if he's good at. And like, did we learn if he's actually a good coach? No, but we were never going to learn that in the press conference. Like, the proof will be in the pudding and in the results on the field. And so like the club is clearly on a charm offensive campaign to try to endear Nico Estevez to the fan base as much as they can in this moment. And I think the biggest takeaway from that big media day is that it's working. Like, I think it is working, that people are willing to give this guy a chance after a few days. Like, several people who a few days before were like, F this, I hate this decision. A few days later being like, okay, I'll give this guy a chance.
Yeah, well, let's talk about like maybe why it's working. And I think we did a video, we did a YouTube video last night from Hop Squad that will come out at some point with some of the other podcasters around town. And the thing I talked about was that it seems like the opening press release was if you were to feed AI a list of the things that most people hated about Josh Wolf and spit out what was the opposite, that was what was in the release, and that's what's being said about Nico, and that being, you know, cares about the fans, wants to connect with media, and is bilingual. Which bilingual, the dude was born in Spain, right? That one's like, and like, that's a truth that cannot be debated. But I just tell you, from everything I've seen this week, like, I feel like it was both something the club was feeding into us and something that was very genuine. It would seem like it would be very hard to fake the way he is approached connecting with fans. Sorry, the way he's approached connecting with the media and with the fans both.
Yeah, and I think that the club was probably going to say and do all these same things no matter who the hire was. But if you put the guy out in front of fans and he is just Josh Wolf again, it probably doesn't have the same effect. But the fact that Nico Estevez does genuinely seem interesting in meeting fans and developing a good relationship with fans, and seems like a person capable of developing good relationships with just people in general, like, I think it's actually working, as opposed to if it were just another person who did not seem good at those things and the club was saying all these things, I don't think it would have the same effect. So like, all that to say, like, credit to Nico Estevez and to the choice on this narrow set of criteria, that like he does seem to be good at these things and genuinely care about these things.
Yeah, absolutely. And that seems like a thing that would be hard to fake, given the amount of access that he's had, with everybody. Like, it's one thing to say that and then not make him available to everyone and not make the video post on YouTube. And I believe that Moises told us last night that it was Nico's idea to like involve all the fans and all the supporters and not just leadership, which is really
he
cool.
said it was going to be like leadership of SGs. And what Moises is saying, that he was told on background that they told Nico that, and he was like, no, I want to meet with everyone, like open the doors, let anyone come in. And we'll get into that event a little bit later, but that feels true.
Yeah. So I think, I don't know. Do you want to just take a break now and get into the details after the first break?
No, I think this is a big point. Let's get into Rodo's role in the press conference.
Oh man, I forgot about that. I forgot we had written this into the first part of it. Never mind. Yes, absolutely. I want to get into this.
So the first question of the press conference that everyone knew was coming, and I, like, anyone who's like listened to a lot of press conferences or has been in those rooms, like we've been lucky enough to do, I think everyone was waiting, like, who's going to ask this question and how are they going to ask it? And it's a question about the names you wouldn't believe quote. Moises from Verde All Day was the one who got his hand up fastest and got to ask it. I thought he asked it in the most diplomatic way possible.
Totally.
And he essentially said, like, okay, you said that names you wouldn't believe are interested in this position. Tell us why this is the name you chose. Like, why was Nico the one you went with? And I thought that was the best and most diplomatic way to answer it, like, to ask that question. And Rodo was like kind of weirdly defensive about it.
And you feel like if he was going to prepare for any question, he had to know that was going to be the one.
Right.
Like, how is it, he should have been ready for that one, and he should have been ready for this guy got fired from Frisco a few months ago, and he's connected to Berhalter. Explain why he's the guy. And he didn't do a very good job with either one of those questions. Yeah.
Luckily, like, Nico, I thought, came across really well in the press conference and in the interviews, like the interviews, my interview, and then the one that Alex from Top Flight did. I thought he came across really well in both of them. I did not think Rodolfo Borrell really did. And, like, just weirdly defensive. He, at a certain point, just like paused the press conference and said, like, I want this to be about the future. Let's not talk about the past anymore. And
which leads to the best visual moment of the press conference, when the immediate next question, which I think was from Corey Mose, and apologies to Corey if it wasn't, went straight back into Frisco. And then we got the dramatic eye roll from Rodo. That
I don't think it was Corey's. Okay. I think it was someone else. Okay. I can't remember who it was, but I want to defend Corey.
Okay, sorry. Someone.
If it wasn't him, but yeah, and I understand it's his prerogative to try to frame a press conference however he wants. He's the one up at the table with the microphone. He can do what he wants up there. But it's a guy just got hired. All we have to work from is what he's done in the past. And so I don't understand how you can say in good faith, like, let's only talk about the future. Let's only talk about the things we don't know yet.
Especially when you've talked about how Nico talked about he hasn't had a chance to meet the players yet. Like, he's brand new.
Yeah.
He's technically still the national team. So we also can't talk about the future because we don't know anything. And let's not talk about the past at the same time.
Yeah, and I thought, again, Nico handled that very well. And the question following that was a very short one. It was like, are you surprised to be here after getting fired in Dallas? And Nico's statement was essentially like, every coach gets fired. Every coach who takes a new job was probably fired from the last job. And so that's just the reality of this profession. And was just very, confident in the answer. Like, didn't take it as a personal attack. which Rodo very much either did or is just like posturing to try to like hedge any other questions that might come in like that.
Yeah. I don't know if I would just agree with you. Nico looked really good in that press conference. Rodo did not cover himself in glory in that press conference. And I think that's like that's all I would have to say about it.
Let's bring. I'll save this for the next segment. So let's take a quick break and let's come back and we'll get into some of the more nitty gritty details and takeaways from all of the interviews and from the press conference and everything like that. Moon Tower Soccer is brought to you by our friends at FEF Law, the official injury lawyers of Austin FC.
FEF is a different kind of personal injury law firm dedicated to community, transparency, and client education. And they have their own podcast called Summary Judgment. You can check it out wherever you get your podcasts.
You can go to FEF.law to find out what makes FEF a different kind of injury law firm and why understanding your legal options can dramatically change the outcome of a case. Once again, that's FEF.law. Amplify Credit Union is a member-owned financial cooperative that served the needs of Central Texans for over 5 decades. As a credit union, Amplify has no shareholders or parent companies. That means more of your money stays in the community.
Amplify has been the home of fee-free banking since 2022. Their free checking accounts come with 0 overdraft fees or minimum balances. That means Amplify's fee-free checking accounts help you get more mileage from your everyday spending.
Amplify membership is open to any Texas resident. Learn to trust your bank again at Amplify Credit Union. To learn more and to register for free parking at the Amplify Esperanza branch on game day next season,
2025,
you can go to www.goamplify.com/moontower-soccer. All right, we are back. Let's jump into some more details that we took away from the interviews and press conference that Nico Estevez did the other day. I guess let's dig in a bit more. This is some of the stuff that I don't think Rodolfo Borrell really got into as to why he hired Nico Estevez or like why that was the choice. But Adrian Healy tweeted something the other day that I thought was interesting. And he said, the tweet was essentially saying like, okay, Rodo set this guy up to be in not a great state with the names you wouldn't believe thing. But one thing he kind of hinted at in this tweet was that that Estevez would probably be quite inexpensive. And so do we think that this had something to do with this hire? Like, okay, yeah, maybe there were names you wouldn't believe, but maybe some of these names are demanding gigantic salaries, whereas Nico Estevez is probably not in the position to do that.
I mean, I think that has to be considered within the realm of possibility. Adrian's not the only person that I've seen a tweet from or talked to. You know, it was one of the things that I heard like in the background last year about why Josh Wolf still had a job past midseason is that like he signed an extension. I don't think it's any secret that this ownership group is not the richest ownership group in the league and needs to spend money wisely, and that maybe spending money on 2 coaches at the same time is not something they want to do, which honestly, if given the choice, I would rather them spend that money on players as opposed to coaches, given what we know about what really matters in this league. But I mean, I think that the cost has to have something to do with it. One thing I was wondering about, we haven't talked about just related to this, is like it feels like getting rid of Josh Wolf as the first coach in the history of this franchise was like a very big like psychological step. And I think we see this a little bit with some of the players who are like the original players in the team that people are emotionally attached to and don't want to see go. And I feel like Nico being the second coach, like nobody's going to have that kind of attachment. And if Austin is bad 2.5 years down the road, everybody's going to be like, yeah, it's time for him to go. That's fine. And that's easier when it's a guy that's not making a ton of money and it's a little bit of a retread. But I mean, I think he has a lot to offer, but on the face of it, it's not all that different.
Yeah, and you say 2.5 years. This was another thing that was not released in any press releases, but I think Michel Sanchez and Moises both came out of the press conference saying that they had been told that the contract was 2 guaranteed years and 1 option year. And so it is it's not short, it's not long, but like it is an easy-ish thing to get out of. It's probably the shortest you could offer anyone, and they'd actually accept it, right?
Yeah, I think that's true. And one other thing, when you were talking about that Rodo didn't get a lot into the details of why Nico was the guy, and this is a short process, and he kept saying like it was a detailed process, but never actually talking about the details of the detailed process. It's like he started with talking about like he's a guy that is coached in the heat, which I thought was a weird beginning point. So what was your reaction to that?
I mean, it's like it's not nothing, but it seemed weird. He mentioned it multiple times, and I don't know, like you just see it seems like he should have had like better things to
a different answer
to say.
Like he knows what it's like to be hot. Okay, let's move
on. Well, one thing that I was interested to hear in the interview that I did with Estevez was I asked him if he knew Rodo before, because they were both coaching in academy / lower levels in Spain at the same time, not that far from each other. Barcelona and Valencia are not that far apart. And he said, no, like I knew who he was. He knew who I was, but we never actually crossed paths. The first time I ever spoke to him was in Austin whenever I brought FC Dallas here. And like I knew Josh, so I went and talked to Josh after the game and met Rodo then. First time ever. And then when he called me, I was surprised. And so this was not didn't seem like, based on what he's saying, a thing that he was tipped off about or was expecting. It was, and this was after he had been in town with Pochettino and the national team. I think he said it was a few days after that he got that first call to do the interview.
Yeah, and he talked about how like this world's a small world, and you would think that they would have crossed paths with each other, but even being where they were, that they managed not to. I think so. On that relationship thing too, I thought it was interesting that he said like, yeah, like I talked to Josh up until the point I couldn't talk with Josh anymore,
right?
Which had to be a really short window, right? Like the window between Josh losing his job, which is when you feel like Nico felt like he would be comfortable starting to talk to Josh, and when Nico got hired was not very long. But I guess, I mean, good on Josh Wolf for not saying awful things about Rodo to the point where Nico was not interested in the job, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Yeah. I'd be curious to be a fly on the wall for that conversation to know what it was like, because I'm guessing like there's only so many coaching jobs. And so regardless of what Josh Wolf says, maybe Estevez takes it anyway. But yeah, I'd be curious to know what they talked about in those conversations. Another thing that I think a lot of people are curious about is Javier Obrian played for Nico Estevez at FC Dallas, was I think the second scorer, second in all goal contributions the year before Obrian came to Austin FC, but was let go. His option not picked up or contract not renewed. I don't remember exactly what the status was, but Estevez mentioned this in the press conference. This is one of the questions that was in Spanish, but he said like, yeah, sometimes there's things in soccer you don't really want to do, but because it's a salary capped league, you have to make difficult decisions, and this was one of them. But like the quote was, "I love Hot Air." Like he said, "I love him," and said that they have a really great relationship, that he's looking forward to working with him again. So hopefully that's true. It'd be unfortunate if the opposite were true, and that he's like, "Oh yeah, I shipped him off as fast as I could. I hated that guy, and now I'm his coach again."
Especially when it was when did the Hot Air announcement like come out? Well, no, it was probably long enough after. It's probably long enough after Josh was dismissed that hopefully there was like some contact between Rodo and Nico about this. Long enough being 9 days about whether he literally hated him or not, or whether they could find a way to work together. I did like that response. And I think my favorite thing he talked about was the playing style, and I feel like it's something people kept coming back to, because I think there's no doubt that he's from the Berhalter tree. They play a certain way. We know that Rodo likes the certain way that they're playing, and so that's one of the reasons when we talked last week about why Nico could be a good choice. It's because he plays that style, and I enjoyed how much he talked about building his game around the players. And when he was continually pressed about specifically how he wanted to play in the press conference. He kept going back to like, I haven't met the players, I haven't watched the players, I don't know, but I'm going to build what I do to the players. And going back to that Steve Davis article that you talked about last week, which I read in detail this week, that seems like a thing maybe that he wasn't great at in Frisco, because like I feel like that article was a lot about like he failed because he didn't adjust, and so
Well, yeah,
and very much in contrast to Josh Wolf, this seems like encouraging.
I'll say like he did adjust because he did change things in the 2024 season. It just didn't work.
Okay, that's fair.
And so like I think that it's still a concern, but like he was willing to change it and it just didn't really work. And then the stuff that I think one of the big complaints about him in Dallas in 2024 was they had played a 4-3-3 in the previous 2 seasons and had done quite well. And then he shifted to this back 3 with wingbacks system in 2024. And I listened back to some FC Dallas podcasts and read some articles, and then in that Steve Davis article. And a lot of people were saying, let's go back to the 4-3-3. It's what the players know. It's what the players like. They fire Nico Estevez, bring in Peter Lucine, and what does he do? He plays a back 3 the rest of the season. And so it's not like the new guy came in and was like, yeah, let's go back to our roots. It's like, no, I'm going to do the same thing that Nico was just doing. And so it seems like there was maybe reasoning for why he was doing it, which is, I mean, they were bad, so it's not encouraging by any means, but it seemed like there was maybe a reason for it. One thing that I came away encouraged by was him talking about one of the questions I asked. I knew a lot of people were going to ask him about the playing style, and I just listened to the press conference and knew he was not going to give me a straight answer as far as like, what is this team going to look like? So I asked him, like, what are the non-negotiables for you? You said you want to see the players, you want to find out who they are before you tell them how they need to play. But like, what are the non-negotiables for Nico Estevez? And he said, I want to have structure and I want to be aggressive in the press. And that is the thing that is encouraging to me. And I think should be encouraging to folks who think the possession game, the Berhalter system is boring, that a press, and he also mentioned counter press. I don't remember if that was in our interview or in the press conference, but a focus on an aggressive counter press, which is you have the ball, you lose the ball, you swarm the opponent immediately after that. Pep Guardiola used to call it his 5-second rule in Barcelona, that if we lose the ball for 5 seconds, you run like your hair is on fire and try to win it back. If you don't win it back in 5 seconds, regroup, fall back into your defensive shape. But that is the thing that like people who are not sold on the positional play game, that this is a thing that can make a game exciting, is a counter press. Like a good organized counter press can be a lot of fun. And so that's encouraging to me. And I think a thing that I've complained about on the show a lot is how Austin's press never seemed organized, and that maybe we didn't have the best personnel for it, but even like it seemed like they could and should have been better at it. And it was an organization. It's more about, a press is more about operating as a unit and less about individual talents. And I'll say, like, offensively, I think it's more about individual talents at a certain point. But defensively is the thing, like, okay, this is a coaching thing. This is an organization, repetition, structure thing. And the fact that he's mentioning that as a thing that he takes really seriously is really encouraging to me. A thing that I'm not entirely sure about, so if you look back at the 2022 FC Dallas team, their midfield was, I think, mostly Brandon Cervania, some other guys at the 6, and then Paxton Pomacall and Sebastian Lletget, some really dynamic midfielders. And then in 2024, he had Asier Iramendi, who's a fantastic player, but he's 35 years old, not the fastest guy. And then Liam Fraser, who's also a big unit, not the fastest, most dynamic player. I don't think he could do that anymore. And that was maybe part of why they had to shift to this other system. Not to mention bringing in Pedro Musa to play the 9, where Jesus Ferreira was really good at the 9 for them in the previous 2 seasons. And now it's like, okay, we brought in a 9. We have to find another spot for Jesus, and maybe that 3-5-2 was the best way to do that. But yeah, I'm excited to see what he can do, and like maybe see like how the next few signings inform that opinion of like, are we bringing in guys who are gonna be good, dynamic players in that counter press system?
You know, one other thing that I picked up on from the Rodo press conference at the end of the year to this one, which is maybe not a big deal because it's like it's a common coaching statement, is at the end of the year press conference, like I asked Rodo, like, okay, so what, with one game left, what do you want to see from the players, knowing there's an interim coach and they're out of the playoffs? What do you want to see? And he talked about the level of effort we've seen for the last 2 games, and he felt like during 2024 at least that the club did not give consistent effort throughout every single match. And Nico talked a lot about like valuing guys that work hard and valuing effort. And that seems like that's another thing that they have in common, and maybe it's just coach speak, because I feel like every coach should want his players to work hard all the time. But I thought it was interesting that was something specifically Rodo called out about not getting out of this 2024 club, that Nico in the introductory, when he was talking about what he wanted out of players, like covered, I think, both in the press conference and the interview that he did with you.
Yeah, and that was another thing I asked him about, is like, how do you see the role of the coach? What's the importance of a coach? What's the relationship between a coach and a sporting director? And he didn't give me quite the answer I was looking for, but he did say like the relationship is important. The fact that we're on the same page is important, so that like we both know what style we're going for. We both know what players need to fit into that system. And I'll have my moments to say when like this is what I want, but like the fact that we're on the same page is a big deal. And I think it really just knowing what we know about the FC Dallas setup, I feel like it is quite different from what he's going to have with Rodo, where those guys in Dallas are very much more like on the businessman end of front office folks, whereas Rodo is very much on the football end of a front office. And I think that those conversations are probably sounding a lot different than the ones he had with Dan Hunt and Andre Sanota.
Yeah, totally makes sense. Let's go to the meet and greet. Maybe I was not at the meet and greet because I was in actual Dallas. I was going to say I was not in Frisco. I was in the city of Dallas. But you went and got to see him interact with the fans. And what was like your experience there? Or do you have any like takeaways?
Yeah, I mean, first off, I'll say I got to meet Tom Halleck, who sends in questions to the show, and we answer a lot. And then his friend V, and V actually told me like she didn't listen to that many podcasts, but found Moon Tower and really appreciates it. And then got a friend who listens to 0 podcasts, but was Austin FC curious, and was like, okay, you got to listen to this one, and got them to listen to our show. So V, thank you very much. Tom, it was great to meet you in person. But yeah, they brought Nico out, handed him a megaphone as soon as he walks out into the crowd, and he gives a little speech that I think they posted it to social media, but he did really well. Like I think I said last week that he's not like this immensely charismatic person, but like having met him in person, seeing him in this press conference, seeing him give this speech to the fans there, he does have this like soft charm to him that that's like, does it make sense like how I'm differentiating charisma and charm?
No, yeah, like, it does. That's what I got from your interview and the We Are Awesome TV interview. It's like and maybe this is why he chose to do this also, is like he seems the best in sort of like an intimate one-on-one setting where he can just kind of be himself, and he's not like a politician, right? He's not, out there, selling a thing or whatever, but like he's the best at sort of quiet and personal moments.
Yeah, he's not the life of the party, and he said this in our interview, which I didn't do yet, but got a suggestion to add this to the soundboard. But he said, I like to cook, and said like it seems like he's not the life of the party, but when he's at a party, everyone's happy to talk to him.
Yeah, he said he said I like to cook for people, so he's not like
right.
It's like you're going to a hibachi and like he's going to put on a show. It's just like you're going to come. He's going to make a paella. He's going to make sure you're like comfortable and having a good time. And I think it's great out of a coach.
Yeah, and I think going back to a point we made earlier, something Phil West wrote in his article covering that whole press tour day. Phil West said, for some fans at least, Nico Estevez transformed on Tuesday into a name that people want to believe in rather than one they could ruefully believe. And I think that's true. I think, as we said before, I think there were a lot of doubters, a lot of people not very happy with it, who, at a minimum, are thinking now, like, let's give this guy a chance. Let's see what he can do.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly where I am. I mean, it still ultimately comes down to results in the field. And one thing I liked about his answers about his results were, when he was talking about, like, yeah, we had injuries, we had hardships, we had whatever, but like ultimately, like, I'm the coach, and it comes down to what happens on the field. And if we don't succeed, then it's reasonable that I'm going to lose my job, which is a little bit of maybe a difference between things we've heard from him and things we've heard from Josh Wolf, and maybe it comes from humility from going through that SC Dallas job, but it seems genuine that he has positioned himself in the eyes of, like, at least me and a lot of fans to give him some leeway and hope for him to succeed. And then we'll see. Like, the results are all that really ultimately matters, but he's off on the best foot one can be 2 weeks after a season's ended and we're months away from playing again.
Yeah. One thing, I kind of meant to mention this earlier, but one thing we got into in my interview was how much experience he had before coming to the U.S. And I hadn't done this math before the interview, but did it afterwards. Looking at the timeline of, I think he's like 3 or 4 years younger than Josh Wolf. Looking at the timeline of when Josh Wolf retired as a player and transitioned into coaching, at that point in time, even though he is a few years younger, Nico Estevez had been coaching for over 10 years at that point. And so, again, I'm not saying you should believe 100% that this guy is going to be the answer, but I do think he deserves just a touch more respect when we're talking about the experience part, because he has quite a bit of experience at, like, relatively high levels compared to MLS as compared to Josh Wolf. So, yeah, okay, maybe he's not the right-hand man of Pep from Manchester City coming in to coach Austin FC. That would have been a different thing, clearly. But if we're comparing him to Josh Wolf, like, he really does have a lot more experience.
And he talked about that being a thing that he shares in common with Rodo, right? Where their background is not in being players for a long time, but honestly, like, getting into coaching fairly young and being a very non-traditional path, especially in a lot of almost every sport, right? You get you get a pass if you played the game, right? As opposed to if you're somebody from the sidelines. So, like, both of those guys have managed to kind of overcome that stigma. And I think it's something that we have not talked. We're not going to, like, redo this, but, like, we have not talked about enough tonight, and people don't understand probably enough, is, like, his background before the national team at Dallas and how much that's made him the coach he is today.
Yeah. All right. Anything else before we move on to the rest of the news of the week?
No, let's get into the news.
All right. Let's take a quick break first, and then we'll come back with the rest of the news.
Moon Tower Soccer is brought to you by Sage Wilson Realty. The Sage Wilson team is made up of Austin experts who are client-focused and have over 30 years of combined real estate experience.
If you or someone you know are in need of Sage real estate advice in Austin, talk to our friends at Sage Wilson Realty. Be sure to check them out online at sagewilson.com.
Our premier sponsor is McGuire Woods Consulting, helping clients in the public affairs space from lobbying at the local, state, and federal levels to digital and communications campaigns across the country. These guys are probably also taking Wednesday morning off after spending way too much time digging into, like, cross-tab poll results and whatever else might happen to come out of Tuesday night.
McGuire Woods Consulting has offices in 10 MLS cities and is proud to support Moon Tower Soccer and support Austin FC's 2025 March to the Playoffs. Contact our friends at McGuire Woods Consulting at mwcllc.com for more information. All right, we are back. Let's talk a little bit about some more staff turnover at Austin FC, and then maybe some potential roster effects coming up here in the near future.
Okay, let's do it. So you want to start with staff turnover? Let's talk about former guest of the show, Dave Tenney, had posted recently. I don't remember what his title was. And soccer
director of high performance.
Director of high performance. Yeah, soccer.
Something of high performance.
Something of high performance. And soccer people's LinkedIn's are not always the best place to go, but we're kind of tipped off that Dave might be on his way out. And so I went and checked, I don't know, a couple nights ago on LinkedIn, and he is now definitely a consultant. So like I would expect Austin to bring in more high performance staff. Although I think like the training staff and stuff still seems relatively consistent with what we've seen in the past. But you know, Dave's out, which I feel like we've talked about him a lot, and it'll be interesting to see like who Austin hires and if there's a shift in philosophy or anything beyond that. Because if I remember, Dave was like super data based, had backgrounds in both MLS and the NBA, and it may signal like a different approach if depending on the new person who comes in.
Yeah, and a guy that's, again, I've said this on the show many times, highly regarded in the field. And so I think we had both heard from different places that there was some turnover in the medical staff. I kind of took that to mean that like it was going to be the people working under Dave, but it seems like no, Dave's included in this turnover. Yeah. So this is where it seems like, I don't know if this specific move is related to this, but the broader picture seems to be that Rodolfo Borrell is now that he's like integrated here, has the roster in a bit more stable position, is starting to recreate this club in his image. And we'll find out what that means in the near future. Like we only have a few player signings to base it off of. In that regard, I'm like, okay, I trust you at this so far. This other stuff, I have no idea. Like we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and we don't have any good frame of reference to evaluate this, right? But given this team and like what we know about it, and how long it's been around, so I think we can move. Let's move on to players. So a question: there's 20 senior roster spots in Major League Soccer for every team. This is a callback to a Verde All Day article from I think late last week, if I remember right, where Phil kind of broke down what spots were taken, what's available, and this goes back to a little bit of what we heard from Rodo last year. You know, already doesn't seem like there's a ton of flexibility, so there are definitely 15 senior roster slots taken out of the 20 available. We, depending upon what happens with Owen Wolf, he may or may not be 16, and then we can lead into this next story with being that we've heard Dani Pereira is, regardless of, like, his option has been picked up, regardless of whether his option is picked up or is extended, like he becomes the probable 17th player on the senior roster either way, given where he came from before and the fact that his original GA contract is sort of is no longer available to him.
Right. I think we should say 16th. I feel like there's a good chance Owen remains on the supplemental spot, at least for this year. So let's call Dani the 16th senior roster spot here. And yeah, I think I saw this from Arias Silva reporting from watching Dani Pereira's Twitch stream. Someone asked him on the chat, like, hey, like, has your option been picked up? And Dani said that they have picked up his option, but have not reached out about a contract extension. And so, given the fact that Diego Rubio, Jader Obrian, Brendan Heinzike were all on option years and did not only have their option year picked up, but just got a new contract with an extension added onto it. The fact that Dani Pereira, who is, I would say, a bigger piece of the core of this team and the like future prospect of this team, is not getting this extension, it raises some questions, right?
Yeah, it has to. And I don't think you had to like couch that statement either in terms of comparing Dani to the other guys. So if we look at possibilities, I mean, one is that, remember, there's last year was talk about like Dani got his green card last year, and everybody assumed he was going to not have. He
got a new Venezuelan passport.
Oh, that's right. It wasn't a green card.
I think he got a green card.
It's like the assumption, like what was reported was that this meant that he would no longer occupy a national roster slot. We heard otherwise. He's still on a national roster slot. Austin still seems to be thin in availability of international roster slots, especially given Burrell's preference for building from people outside of the United States. So it's the possibility that we're waiting to see. Austin's waiting to see what happens with Dani before making a long-term commitment. But you have other theories about that I would like you to bring up, or at least one other theory you should bring up now.
I think the international status in MLS is a big deal, so that could be part of it. I think in any case where there's a player who is probably better than the salary that they're on, which I would put Dani in that category at this moment. That,
absolutely.
That Dani's camp is playing a little bit of hardball and like asking for a certain number. Rodolfo Burrell and company don't think he's worth that number, and there's just a negotiation going on. Again, we've not heard anything. This is all speculation. So that's just a possibility in a situation like this. The other possibility, which is the theory that I think might be right, is that Rodolfo Burrell is shopping Dani Pereira. It's like looking at what the options are on the market, whether it be within MLS or elsewhere. And the fact that, especially if it's within MLS, if his salary is low, then a team is maybe willing to give you more in that trade, whether it be player or allocation money. And if you renew it, okay, yeah, that extends the contract, but then the salary probably goes up significantly on that renewal as well, as opposed to just taking that option year. So again, we know nothing, but I would not be shocked if they said, okay, we're just going to take this option year and maybe like entertain offers for him in this offseason. If we can sell him, then we will. If not, and he sticks around, then maybe we start talking about the contract renewal. And I think a lot of people might be asking, why would you sell Dani Pereira? I think there's a few, like, hear me out. I know this will be not a popular thing to do among the fan base. But as far as like cap space goes, there are other players you can move, and I'm sure they're trying to move some of these guys, but a lot of the other options that you would want to get off of this roster, all they're doing is freeing cap space that they are currently taking up. Dani Pereira is a player that would be a net positive cap space because he's not taking up any at the moment. Next year, we'll be taking up relatively little compared to his quality, but his transfer value, whether it be abroad or within MLS, is going to far surpass that budget charge that he's hitting at the moment. So that is a huge reason. So budget cap wise, like, he opens up a lot of flexibility for Burrell. The other thing is Dani Pereira is a difficult player to build a midfield around. He's not creative enough to be the most creative midfielder. He's not defensive enough to be the most defensive midfielder. And so whenever you're like, okay, who are we bringing in to upgrade Johan Valencia and Alex Ring? What is the midfield trio when you almost have to put Driussi there unless we do something with moving him out to the wing or something like that? Like, if there's going to be three midfielders, one of them's Driussi, one of them's Pereira, what is the profile of the guy that makes like a complete and well-rounded midfield alongside those two guys? The profile of those two guys is really difficult to build around, in my opinion. And so for that reason alone, like, okay, Dani's really good at a few things. He's below average at a few other things. If we can cash in on him and then start from scratch with a couple of more well-rounded guys in that midfield, it might make the roster build and like the starting 11 build a little more simple for Nico Estevez.
So I would have one point of agreement to make and one question to make. As someone would be very, very sad about Dani Pereira being gone and would only be up for the deal if it was something that was very net positive to the team, which is where I'll start with, is, among the players in this club that have positive value. I mean, I would even say, like, there's a lot of guys you're trading like for like. It's like you're begging somebody to take them off your hands. You probably had to pay them something to do it. Like, I think like Dani and John Gallagher might be the only two people that are on good enough contracts.
I think those are the only ones.
The only two, right? The only two are on good enough contracts where you can make positive value.
You could throw Brad Stuver in there, but it just feels very unlikely that
Right.
for like the salary Brad's on, his impact on the team and on the community, like it doesn't feel easily replaceable. Whereas John Gallagher and Dani Pereira, the amount of money you could bring in from those guys compared to their salary budget charge, you could upgrade not just their spot, but a few other spots too with the money that came in.
Right. And I think Danny's the greatest opportunity out of that because John's a little bit older, been around the league a long time, had a lot of opportunities. Can't do that. So like I can definitely see that, but it would have to be there for the right kind of deal. What we talked about, I mean, it's maybe been a couple years, but I want to talk about him as a player or ask you about him as a player. You know, one of the things that we talked about is like the best Danny is like the Venezuelan version of Darlington Nagbe. Like, where do you see him falling short in that specific comparison?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think Nagbe has developed himself to be a bit more deeper lying. And I'll give him credit in saying that he has developed that part of his game a little bit more to be enough of a defensive presence to not be a detriment to the team there. But I will also say Darlington Nagbe has always had guys playing next to him that made up for his shortcomings in having Diego Chara in Portland, Aiden Morris in Columbus. Those two guys are like generational talents in this league, really, really good two-way players. And unless you have that next to a player like that who is a specialist, it's okay, ball progression with carrying the ball at his feet and press resistance with just being hard to take the ball off of. You need the person next to him to either be a defensive stalwart like Diego Chara was, or a guy who can do a little bit of all of it and play some defense, progress the ball, really good passer like Aiden Morris was next to him in Columbus. We don't have that here in Austin. If we could bring that in, then I think that's a passable thing. But like, it's easier said than done. Like, okay, yeah, just bring in one of the best midfielders in the league to play next to him. Okay, cool, easy.
Yeah, no, that's very fair. No, I just wanted it because we've talked about that on and off over time, and I feel like that's not a conversation we've had in a while. So that makes a ton of sense. And speaking of midfielders who may be on their way out, we got the Johan Valencia, which I think neither one of us will be very brokenhearted about him being gone, although he has an amazing smile.
Or surprised, like right? I think more so surprised.
Or surprised.
I'm not going to be surprised to see him leave.
Yeah, so we get this mystery-ish post on Instagram, which was what, green heart, black heart, and a wave. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was something very much and it was
shrug emoji.
Field. Yeah. Oh, shrug emoji.
Shrug emoji, green heart.
Yeah.
And so, again, this is was it Julio Cascante or someone else that we were talking about? The plausible deniability post, right? Of, okay, I'm expressing something, but what exactly it is up to interpretation. The song that was playing in this post was like a fan chant from Deportivo Cali, which is his team in Colombia, which also wears green. And so I guess that's the plausible deniability part. But aside from that, just like I would be shocked to see Johan Valencia still on the roster next year, just because of the quality to salary ratio. Rodo has to believe he can go out and do better on the open market.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I would say to future players, if you want to play to future players who may be on the way out, if you're going to play When I See You Again by Charlie Puth, like that would be like a way more obvious way for us to like interpret your Instagram posts on whether you're staying or going. I don't know. Is there anything else we need to talk about, or you want to?
I will say one thing that I've just like, we're talking about the amount of senior roster spots. Like the most senior roster spots we could get right now, if we just declined every other option, including Dani Pereira, there would be 5 senior roster spots open. Dani Pereira is not going anywhere, or we're going to have to do something else, but he's almost certainly going to be there. So let's say it's 4. I think that means like I'm looking at the MLSPA's free agent list, the like various players available in the league that may or may not be available, and thinking like, okay, in a certain scenario, I might say like this player is intriguing as a backup, but Austin FC is in a position now where we essentially need all 4 of those senior roster spots to be starters.
We got all the backups we need, right? We have all the
Right.
depths. Austin has all the depth in the world. Austin needs top end talent to put that depth on the bench.
Yeah. And so I'm looking at, okay, Brian Anunga's got left off in Nashville, and like Brandon Cervania is coming off of injury in Toronto. Maybe he would be good options. Like, no. We need nailed on starters for all of these spots, essentially. And it's like, it's exciting because I think Rodolfo Borrell probably believes that and will be trying to do that, but it's a big ask, and it makes me nervous at the same time that like, how much can he actually do in this offseason? Are there any other moves he can make to open up some more of those spots?
Yeah, I mean, in this league, you have to be right. You know, you can't like sign a guy who looks like he could be the nailed-on starter on a 3-year deal and like screw it up. I mean, see Giassi Sardes for evidence of like how you
Rodney
can.
Redez, see Jean Kolmanich, see like
Yeah,
all like the U22. I think is one of these spots where like we do have more flexibility because we can spend more money on those U22 spots without it adding the transfer fee into the cap hit. But U22 spots have been like, barring Inter Miami, have not been like a super high return spot. And so it's going to be interesting to see how they use those spots and if they can open up any more.
yeah. All right. Well, before we close out, I do want to give a plug to our friend Aaron Rockland and Soccer Assist. So on Saturday, November 16th, they're going to have their 9th annual Soccer Assist party, which we're not calling a gala anymore because we're just like going to the Scoot Inn and having fun. So that's going to be that Saturday night, 7:15 entry. There's like the West Texas Exiles. There's a Tom Petty cover band playing. So like go check out Soccer Assist, support their work. Be a good time on Saturday night for anyone that might do that. I think it's something we've been to several times in the last few years.
Yeah.
I'm probably going to be with my family in Fredericksburg that night doing like family Thanksgiving, but I won't be there, but that should not stop anybody from coming out. So like, you know, we've always enjoyed it, and you'll see a lot of your soccer friends and family from Los Verdes and Austin Anthem and everywhere else if you happen to go to that event.
Yeah, I've been several times. It's always been a fun time. So definitely go if you're looking to support that. And if you don't know, like Soccer Assist is the organization behind, in partnership with Austin FC, a lot of these like Austin FC branded mini pitches that have been put around the like greater Austin area. And I think there's 5 or 6 of them now, but it's just free open mini soccer pitches that have been converted from just like old basketball courts and tennis courts that nobody used. And they put a bunch of money into them and make them these really nice facilities that are just free for the community to use. So it's a really cool project. All right. Before we wrap up, we'd like to remind you to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Come find us on the internet at the places where we are. Moon Tower Soccer on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Thanks so much for listening. We will be back next week with I guess we're going to do hopefully we'll do the over under with Marcelo next week. Maybe that should be what we aim for next week. The review of our preseason predictions.
People tell us they look forward to that every week, and I mean every year. Sorry, and it's like the scariest night of show of my year every year. Is when I realized how bad I was at predicting what was going to happen going into the season. But yeah, sure, man, let's do it.
All right. Well, we'll be back next week, maybe doing that and covering any other news that breaks. Until then, I'm Landon Cottom.
I'm Jeremiah Bentley.
We'll catch you next time.
When no one is around.
Thank for nothing, you never.
La gente. Oh my God.